The purpose of these lessons is to show you the logic behind the most basic Chinese characters, beginning with the simplest pictograms, and later combining these elements to create more complex characters. Today's lesson includes 9 characters, 8 of which contain an enclosure of some sort, referring to city walls, cooking pots, and mattresses filled with straw. First, let's compare 2 characters with similar-looking elements. 问, to ask, which has a mouth radical ko between the doors, and 国, country, which contains both a small and a large enclosure, called wei in Chinese calligraphy. The characters in today's lesson refer only to enclosures, which are usually, but not always, larger in size than the mouth radical. Our first character is an ancient pictogram of the solid walls of a fortress, suggesting strength and security. Or, if referring to people, it means obstinate, stubborn, unyielding in their beliefs. Pronounced fourth tone, gu, gu. You will notice that it contains the phonetic gu that we saw in Lesson 15, indicating that these walls have long withstood enemy attacks, literally for 10 generations. It's a phono-semantic compound. If matched with the character ding from Lesson 13, we have the expression 固定, meaning to set, fix in place, or, as an adjective, regular or fixed, as in fixed working hours, regular meals, etc. For example, 她看书时间是固定的. She has a fixed reading schedule, a definite time set aside for reading. Notice the 是的 pattern for emphasis in this example and the next. 椅子是固定在地上的. The chairs were fixed to the floor. Our next character takes 固 as its phonetic element. It's pronounced fourth tone, 个, and is another phono-semantic compound character. You will remember that 本 is the measure word for books and magazines, 一本书. Well, now we have 个, another measure word, but this time it's for most things or people. As a measure word, it's pronounced with a neutral tone, 个. The number for 1, yi, is pronounced second tone, yi, in front of it, just as if ge was still a fourth tone. Here are 10 examples. 一个人, a person. 一个天才, a genius. 一个省, a province. 一个早上, a morning. 一个家, a home. 一个太太, a wife. 一个字, a character. 一个书包, a book bag. 一个月, a month. 一个包子, a meat or vegetable-filled bun. As we learned in Lesson 18, 二月 means February, month number 2. And now we have 两个月, meaning 2 months. A permanent home would be translated as 一个固定的家, with 个 as the measure word. However, if you hear a Chinese speaker use a different measure word than 个, be sure to add that word to your vocabulary and use it instead. There are dozens of very specific measure words that you can learn when you need them. When given its original fourth tone, 个, it emphasizes the idea of each one individually. So, 个人 would mean a person considered as an individual, similar to the English way of saying, I myself. As for myself, I personally. 个 can also be doubled to express the idea of each and every one of something. Here's a table from Lesson 10 where we solve this reduplication with nouns, adjectives, and verbs. When used with measure words, the effect is still one of emphasis on each and every one. 本本 for books, 间间 for rooms and buildings, 个个 for each and every one of anything. The expression 个子 is also used to describe a person's height or body build. For example, 个子大, a person of big or strong build. 个子小, a short person or a person of slight build. The third character in today's lesson is a pictogram of a woven mattress filled with straw, probably like the Japanese tatami. This character is pronounced first tone, yin, yin. From the modern writing, the original grass weaving was apparently mistaken for a man lying on it. But that doesn't change the meaning. Rather, it clarifies even better the idea of foundation and support, the underlying cause or reason for something. Literally, it lies under the man. It can be translated as in light of, on the basis of, because, or in accordance with. The main reason, the principal cause of something would be rendered 主因. To say as a result or thus, we could use the expression 因而. Literally, what lies under leads to what follows. This next example shows this expression in two parts. 因个人的需要而定. It depends on the needs of the individual. This could refer to something being custom-made, or even a patient's medical care, anything tailored to the individual. This next pictogram does not contain the enclosure radical, but it's a useful verb that matches well with 因. It's a drawing of a hand that loses its grip on a stick, letting it fall. A simple way to show the idea of loss, neglect, omission, letting slip or making a mistake. It's pronounced first tone, 诗, 诗. Over centuries of copying by scribes, the original hand radical morphed into what now looks like 夫, the character for an adult male that we saw in lesson 2. 失去 is the verb to lose, and 失主 is the owner of lost property or the victim of a robbery or burglary. When paired with the foot or hand characters, there has been some kind of mistake. 失足 means to lose one's footing, either literally to stumble or figuratively to make a mistake or misstep in some interaction. 失手 indicates that you've accidentally dropped or broken something, or that a sudden movement by you, and not necessarily only your hand, unintentionally injured another person or caused damage. Now we have another example with 因而 in the same sentence with 流失. 雨水多因而土地流失. Due to heavy rains, the soil washes away. Next, we have a very common four-character fixed idiom, 因小失大. Literally, because small, lose big. In better English, that would be to suffer a huge loss for little gain, or pay dearly for a slight oversight, or possibly even penny-wise and pound-foolish. So far in these lessons, we've learned 6 idioms, some more refined than others, but all of them set phrases used in everyday conversation. 一去不回 in lesson 11, 不了了之 in lesson 14, 没完没了 in Lesson 14, 拖人下水, Lesson 16, 如日中天, Lesson 17, and now 因小失大. Here's a reminder to language learners. The use of idioms and proverbs in English composition writing is strongly discouraged, often earning a low mark in school. Teachers believe it demonstrates a lack of original thinking on the student's part. Originality and creativity count. Chinese writing, on the other hand, is traditionally the opposite extreme. The more set phrases you sprinkle your writing with, especially literary ones, the better read and more learned you sound, provided, of course, you've used the phrases correctly. That's why it's necessary to develop the habit of using these Chinese idioms whenever appropriate. Now we return to our enclosure radical. The fifth character in this lesson is a pictogram showing the Chinese cauldron. Usually round with 3 legs, but sometimes square with 4. Pronounced third tone, ding, ding. Notice the connected strokes in yellow. In ancient China, wine, and especially food cauldrons cast in bronze, were used to make ritual sacrifices, both human and animal, to appease the ancestral spirits. Around 1000 years BC, under the Zhou dynasty, possession of these cauldrons and the privilege of performing the rituals became symbols of power and authority, with the number one could own dependent on a person's rank in society. An example is another fixed idiom, ding ding da ming, meaning renowned or illustrious, likening one's reputation to the massive size and weight of a cauldron. Although originally intended to be used in a positive light, for example, applied to a highly regarded doctor, it can also be a flattering reference to a mafia boss or notorious criminal. Ding ding you ming is a variation of this idiom, as in Ding ding you ming de da di zhu, a well-known and influential landowner. A final example is wen ding, to aspire to the throne, thirst for power, within a country or any organization. When referring to an athlete before a competition, wen ding means to be totally focused on winning. When applied after a competition, it means they achieved their goal and were declared the winner. Wen ding has a story behind it which explains the characters. It is said that, in the waning days of the Zhou dynasty around 300 BC, the ruler of a nearby feudal state, the state of Chu, brought his army to the border of the Chinese Empire. Worried at this display of force, the Zhou emperor quickly arranged for entertainment to appease these foreign troops at his door. The lord of Chu was unmoved and approached the Zhou emperor directly, saying, "I hear that the imperial cauldron in your possession is quite impressive. Exactly how big and how heavy is it?" Clearly, the lord of Chu, by inquiring of the Ding, aspired to the throne of the Chinese Empire. The Zhou dynasty ended soon thereafter. Given that the character for cauldron was an important symbol of power and authority, it figures in several other characters, but was too complicated to write. Over time, when appearing as a component of another character, Ding was drastically reduced from 13 strokes to a mere 7 by streamlining the legs. Our next character shows this. It's a circle indicating the round mouth of a cauldron, obviously meaning a circle or anything round. It's pronounced second tone, yuan, yuan. A circle implies completeness, so yuan was used to represent entire groups of people and eventually to refer to individual members making up that group, that circle. The word for personnel, or anyone engaged in an occupation, is 人员. A member of an organization is 成员, literally one who makes up the circle. And 成员国 would be a member state or member country, as of the United Nations, for example. In modern Chinese, yuan is pretty much restricted to this usage of personnel, or member. But a circle and the concept of roundness has many extended connotations, even in English. For example, in English, we can round off a meal with a glass of brandy, or round out one's education by spending a year abroad. In both instances, round carries the meaning of completing something in a pleasing or satisfactory way. These associations with completion and satisfaction were taken over by our next character, an embellished version of yuan, in which the enclosure is repeated. It's also pronounced second tone yuan and is a phono-semantic compound, actually just a spin-off of the former. Some examples: 月圆了. The moon is full tonight. This is another instance of the l particle indicating a change in the situation, a sudden realization that the moon looks different, so I added tonight in English. A kind of dumpling made with rice flour is called a yuanzi. It's a generic term that includes dumplings the size of glass marbles all the way up to golf ball size, with or without a filling, served in a sweet or savory soup. Yuan is always paired with another character to distinguish which kind it is. In Lesson 13, I gave an example of 1,000 Japanese yen, 1,000 日元. That was the informal character for yen. The official one is this one, 日元. Yen is simply the Japanese pronunciation of yuan and refers to the round silver or copper coins in use before paper money. Whether you call it renminbi or New Taiwan dollars, yuan is the correct name printed on all Chinese currency, bills and coins alike. Do you remember the character huo in Lesson 22, meaning a walled town or feudal estate? The next character in today's lesson is 4 feet encircling a square, that same walled town or feudal estate. The person radical has been added to show a man leaving the town. This character is a phono-semantic compound pronounced third tone, wei, wei. The 4-foot version represents armed sentries encircling and guarding the town, while the 2-foot version refers to people turning away and leaving the town. One of these two meanings will enter into the interpretation of various Chinese characters containing this phonetic element. Wei shows a man unlike other men, unusual in that he doesn't follow the crowd, an individual who distinguishes himself from others. So, 伟人 and its adjective 伟大 both describe an extraordinary individual, male or female. The exclamation 你好伟大 can be one of admiration or sarcasm, depending on the tone of voice. Said in admiration, 你好伟大, it could be translated as, oh, I could never do that. I'm not as brave as you. Said sarcastically, 你好伟大, it might sound something like, oh, you poor thing, you've sacrificed so much. Or, that's very big of you, so magnanimous. There are lots of possibilities for sarcasm here. The last character in today's lesson is the purple phonetic 尾 inside an enclosure. Also pronounced second tone 尾, meaning to encircle or surround, the original 4-foot version of the character. To avoid any misunderstanding, 包 is paired with 围 to ensure the meaning of surround or encircle is clear. 包围. 外围 is the combination used to say perimeter or periphery. And yes, computer peripherals would also use this expression. If you plan to have a physical examination, doctors now take your waist measurement, 腰围, to determine the amount of abdominal fat surrounding your internal organs, and thus your risk of cardiovascular disease. Here is our color chart with today's 9 characters. 顾 in 尾 yuan 个 yuan 顶 shi and 围. A note about the simplified character for 个. The original oracle bone script is the drawing of 2 sprigs of bamboo, reduced to just 1 to express the idea of a single unit of anything, which is how it's used today. The traditional version is a phono-semantic compound created later. Remember that elegant calligraphy has always been a highly esteemed art form to the Chinese. Separate strokes in the original character are often reordered, combined, connected, or otherwise abridged for artistic reasons. The simplified character for book, 书, in Lesson 2, and other simplified characters in today's lesson are the result of taking this highly artistic calligraphic style and declaring it the official printed form. The goal of the Chinese Ministry of Education was to reduce the number of strokes of common characters to 10 or fewer, if at all possible. So, what have we learned in today's lesson? 1. The enclosure radical is usually, but not always, larger than the mouth radical, and generally represents a town or feudal estate. In the character 固, it suggests strength and security, or, if referring to people, it means obstinate and unyielding. The phrase 固定 means regular or fixed in place. 2. 个 is the catch-all measure word when you've forgotten the correct one. When pronounced fourth tone, 个. It emphasizes each person or thing taken individually, such as I myself, me personally, 我个人. 3. A drawing of a woven mattress stuffed with straw is the origin of 因, indicating the underlying cause for whatever follows. The main reason is 主因. As a result, can be translated 因而. 4. A hand dropping a stick is the pictogram for 失, to lose something. 失主 is the owner of whatever was lost. When paired with a foot, 失足 means a physical stumble or metaphorical misstep. When matched with hand, 失手 says you've broken something by accident or caused injury or damage by a sudden, clumsy movement. 5. The Chinese language is full of fixed idioms and uses them far more than an English speaker would when speaking his or her native tongue. Students of Chinese should get into the habit of using them and not avoiding them for fear of sounding trite. This lesson gives 2 new idioms, 因小失大 and 鼎鼎大名. 6. A ding is a large bronze cauldron used in ritual sacrifices that became associated with power and imperial authority. 7. 鼎鼎大名 is an idiom meaning renowned, illustrious, enjoying an especially good reputation. 鼎鼎有名 is a variation. 8. 问鼎 is an expression meaning to thirst for power, seek to achieve the highest position in a country, within a corporation, or in the field of sports. 9. Being rather hard to write, the character ding was drastically reduced in complexity and appears in other characters related to cooking vessels. The abridged version appears in the character referring to the round shape of the cauldron, which eventually became the character for a member of a group, 成员, or an occupation, 人员. 10. An extension of this character is 圆, inside an enclosure, which refers to roundness, completeness, satisfaction, and round objects such as coins and dumplings. Yuan is the monetary unit of all Chinese currency, and was borrowed as the unit of other Asian currencies as well, the Japanese yen and the Korean won. 11. The character showing 4 feet encircling a walled town or feudal estate represents armed sentries guarding the area. Later, the 4 feet were reduced to 2, providing 2 distinct interpretations of this phonetic component. 1. Protection of an area, and 2. Turning away from and leaving an area. With the person radical, 为 refers to an extraordinary individual, 为人, who turns away from the beaten path, and 为大 is the adjective describing him or her. Of course, a sarcastic usage is always possible. 12. The phonetic 围 inside an enclosure means to encircle or surround, harkening back to the ancient 4-foot variant meaning to guard or protect. 包围 is the phrase for to encircle or surround. 外围 is the combination to express perimeter or periphery. And during a physical examination by your doctor, 腰围 would be your waist measurement, which helps determine how much abdominal fat you have and your risk for cardiac disease. Now you will find a short quiz on double, triple character, and longer expressions. Answer using only the characters learned so far. Thank you for watching and listening.